Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Here I am coming again to discuss about East African politics. It is going to be a continuation of the first video I did, but this one is going to be on the question whether Eritrea should be considered sovereign or not by Ethiopia. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to go a little bit back in history. Till about 1942, Eritrea was under the Italian colonialism. 1942 till 1952, it was under the control of the British after the Second World War. Ladies and gentlemen, 1952 to 1961, it was unwillingly federated to Ethiopia, mainly instigated by the United Nations, of course, backed up by strong influence of America. And then in 1962 to 1991 was part of Ethiopia. Eritrea was. In 1991, it was liberated after 29 years of Ethiopian colonialism. Ladies and gentlemen, Eritreans read this history as colonialism. Okay, one more time. 1952, federation with Ethiopia. 1961, Arab struggle for independence started, actually 1 year prior to the end of the federation. And then in 1962, Ethiopia annexed Eritrea. 1991, Eritrean independence was achieved. In 1993, United Nations supervised international referendum was held all over the world. I believe I was in Minnesota at that time, Minneapolis, Minnesota. In 99, probably about 6 or 8% of the Eritreans voted for independence. Then 1993, Eritrean nationhood was recognized worldwide. Eritrea became a member state of the United Nations, and she still is. So, first of all, is the question that we're going to discuss right now, really, does it make sense? Does it make sense? All the world, all countries in the world recognize Eritrea as an independent state. So should Ethiopia raise this issue as such, and she wants to pull the recognition of the Eritrean nationhood? Does this make sense? Let's go to the discussion. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It's a new channel. Here we only talk about the truth, the relative truth.
Strong reason to believe the Horn Review is a mouthpiece of the regime. Maybe I could add some information for our listeners as well. Recently, the past couple of days, it has been in a state of hysteria. You could say every morning there is editorial. That would be the first think tank where it gives editorial every morning, because normally that doesn't happen. And all of them are about Eritrea. And there are times when they seem to be experimenting with arguments and floating ideas. And one of the ideas that they have been floating now is whether Ethiopia could withdraw its recognition of Eritrea at the state. And that is important because, I don't know if you have watched it, but there was a clip from Abiy Ahmed doing the rounds where he was saying that he couldn't find the documents where the recognition of Eritrea and Ethiopia were discussed and the letters exchanged and all that. I don't know if you saw that. And maybe that is one thing that Ethiopia is considering now. I don't know how dangerous or how unprecedented that would be, but maybe they are thinking of withdrawing recognition of Eritrea as a sovereign state. If you could reflect on that as well, because I find this interesting, that should be under consideration.
Well, first of all, I don't think many Ethiopians entertain this illusion. I don't think so. We've seen a lot of Ethiopian intellectuals discussing about peaceful cooperation. All that. This idea should be limited only within the Abiy group, to my understanding. Let's see how the professor responds to this nonsense.
This robotic puppy is so lifelike, it acts...
On the point that the Prime Minister said that he couldn't find the document acquiescing Eritrea's de facto independence, I think that's what he means. There is no There is no Council of Ministers minutes. There is no parliamentary action.
Well, he says that there is no. He said that you couldn't figure out who made the decision, the final decision, for instance, to allow Eritrea to hold referendum, to recognize it, and so that was the point he was trying to get at.
Yeah, let me just go back to my point that that's what he says, that the Council of Ministers hasn't made that decision. The Parliament hasn't made that decision. The TPLF alone made that decision is what he is projecting. That's what he's basically saying. It's a step in the point that you made about delegitimizing Eritrea's independence. So that we looked for it everywhere, said, what a stupid way of putting it. Like, I could have told him that there is no document to look for because we know the Council of Ministers hasn't decided. We know there was no parliament that decided on this issue because Eritrea was independent, not because of by de jure act, but by de facto winning of the war. This editorial that you just mentioned makes this point, the editorial by the Horn Review. It says something like Eritrea emerged, or whatever it says, that the unilateral decision by the TPLF-led transition in Addis Ababa made that decision, but the Eritrean peoples also in the same paragraph, they say the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, now the PFDJ, emerged victorious from the Ethiopian Civil War. What kind of document were you looking for? This same point that you just made, that it's in there. It says Eritrea emerged victorious from the Ethiopian Civil War. Eritrea fought for 30 years after their federation was dissolved in 1962. They fought for 30 years. They emerged victorious, then they create a fact on the ground. What is that supposed to, the TPLF supposed to do?
Well, to just include a little bit, documentation is in history itself. Documentation says in the fact that Eritrea was federated with Ethiopia in 1952, documented in the UN database. I mean, all the history I'm talking about until 1991, till Eritrea defeated the Ethiopian army and liberated their country through the successful armed struggle, very popular armed struggle. Isn't that itself documentation that the whole world knows? The occupied territory, the entire Eritrea, was liberated in 1991 by its people. Isn't the fact that we have been colonized by the Europeans document? And then it's obvious that the state of Eritrea was under the colonialism of Italian Empire till about 1942, okay? And then isn't it documented that the Britons came and ruled Eritrea for 10 more years till 1952, to the time of federation? What is going on here? What kind of documentation are they asking? 1991, Eritrea was independent. It was running the country by itself till 1993, where they did United Nations, internationally observed, internationally recognized, supervised referendum, whereby 99.8% of the people all over the world went for independence. And this was recognized in the United Nations building in New York City, and for Eritrea to be a member state once and for all. Aren't all this documented? Documentation. Why don't they ask the United Nations for all this documentation if they want? It's crazy.
If it is about the ports, remember, all of you that are listening, remember, there was an agreement between Eritrea and Ethiopia at the time that Eritrean ports, Assab and Massawa, will be a free port. Negotiation, they say, it will be a free port. I remember Isaias Afwerki himself came to the National Press Club here. He made that point. There was an agreement. Eritrean ports, Assab and Massawa, were going to be a free port. The change came after the war in
I don't think there would have been any problem to this effect, actually. Eritreans always want to help Ethiopia. We know our responsibilities. Ethiopia right up to access the Red Sea or any kind of seas that we can provide as a neighbor. We are abided by these rules, ladies and gentlemen, and we know our responsibilities very well. Right of access of landlocked states to and from the sea, and freedom of, I couldn't read that one, freedom of transit, Articles 124, 125, but in fact, even more. So, Eritrea has no problem with this. It's just a matter of business. Matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Eritrea allows Ethiopia to access the seas freely for the sake of peace. I wouldn't be surprised at all, although this is unfair, because Eritrea has to get something from Ethiopia as well. They can exchange a lot of things, actually. Electricity for ports. Only access, though. But the fact that it wants to militarize the port, to own it, or to establish a naval force, for what? Who's to be threatened here? Who is the threat for Ethiopia to necessitate that kind of privilege? Is it the Red Sea collectively under surveillance by the international forces? Probably about 12 of them in Djibouti only. There's a German and the countries that on the Red Sea themselves. I'm talking about the Egyptians, the Sudanese, the Eritreans, the Djiboutians, the Somalians, Saudi Arabians and Yemenis, of course, and Jordanians, countries with other international forces stationed everywhere in the region, especially in Djibouti. Cannot all these nations protect these interests of Ethiopia? Why is Ethiopia trying to have a navy? By force, especially by force. Well, let's go to the discussion. I don't understand.
1998. So the notion that TPLF-led transition without any mandate, popular mandate, or parliamentary authorization, there was no reason for popular mandate. There was no parliament to approve this. The fact was created on the ground because of what you just said, that the Horn Review itself says that Eritrea emerged victorious from the Ethiopian civil war.
Well, if you guys remember, in 1991, Eritrea liberated its country. The Eritreans liberated their country a week, probably about 10 days earlier than Addis Ababa's liberation by the TPLF. So what kind of parliament are we talking about? TPLF itself was just entering Addis Ababa after Eritrea was established. I mean, at least in terms of territory being under the armed struggle fighters. Okay, even though it was not legitimate as such, they waited until 1993 to announce their independence after a referendum. So they achieved it by armed struggle, and they achieved it by universal consensus, Eritrean consensus, UN supervised. So how would TPLF give us our independence while it was struggling to survive in Addis with all the odds that it actually encountered within Ethiopia itself? All the problems that it had to settle its problems. How could Wayane give Eritreans or the EPLF Eritrean independence just like that? Wouldn't this undermine the sacrifices Eritreans did through the years, ladies and gentlemen? It doesn't make sense.
The second point of referendum is simply an acceptance of the de facto creation of the Eritrean state. So do they want to withdraw at this point in time? Do they want to withdraw Eritrea's recognition? What difference does it make? What difference does it make? Did Ethiopia give Eritrea their independence? Did Ethiopia grant? Ethiopia simply acquiesced, simply accepted the fact that was created on the ground militarily.
Thank you, Mr. Professor. It wouldn't matter a bit. By the way, Ethiopia withdrawing its acknowledgement of independent Eritrea doesn't make any sense to the world. It wouldn't be accepted. I don't know in what format they would apply to effectuate. To begin with, Eritrea's independence is recognized all over the world. Nobody can turn that flag down in New York City. This is obvious. The whole thing is, to me, it's just insanity. Begin with insanity. And needless to say, our embassy is already in Addis Ababa. It is a contradiction by itself. You cannot have somebody's embassy in your capital city and then contemplate the non-existence of that country represented by the embassy, ladies and gentlemen. It's just so insane. Very unfortunate, very sad. They don't know the history. I don't know what kind of minds are leading Ethiopia in this situation, but we Eritreans don't care about this. We don't need Ethiopia's recognition for survival. We don't need Ethiopia's recognition for our sovereignty. We didn't need Ethiopia's recognition for our sovereignty. We proved it by universally observed, universally supervised referendum, and by our blood and sweat. Ladies and gentlemen, nobody will turn that down. And I consider this one of the most extraordinary dreams in political history.
And then the issue moved from Ethiopia's hands or Eritrea's hands to the international fora, where the United Nations actually observed the referendum, which the Eritrean people made, the referendum that produced 99.8%. And when Eritrea, and I keep reminding people, when Eritrea became a member of the United Nations, and I'm sure they're going to say, oh, the Secretary General of the United Nations was an Egyptian at the time. They will say that, believe me, Taklai, the Ethiopian government would say that in their naked iteration of their absurd reasoning. Boutros Ghali, when Eritrean flag was going up, where it was being hoisted at the United Nations headquarters, Eritrea as an independent state recognized by members of the United Nations as an independent state and accepted as a member state. He said, the war that Eritrean people had fought for 30 years ended in producing an independent Eritrea. Now we have accepted the referendum, and Eritrea is a member state, a sovereign member of the United Nations. What difference does it make? Ethiopia withdrew its. What are they going to do? That when they withdraw, they write a letter to the United Nations? They're going to make a press conference? What are they going to do? They go to Asmara and say, we don't accept you? What is the actual act of unrecognition? I've never heard of unrecognition but what is that they're going to do, and what difference does it make if Ethiopia said so? Eritrea is, whether people like it or not, and I'm not saying this like because I am for Eritrea's independence or not about that. It's just a normative expression saying the facts are the facts. Eritrea is a member of the United Nations. Eritrea is a sovereign state. Whether Eritrea has a constitution, parliament, or economic planning is immaterial. It doesn't matter. Eritrea is a state, and if Ethiopia really wants ports or anything else, or not to be landlocked by geography, or this is the word that he himself used as the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. He said that Ethiopia will never be a prisoner of geography. And now this Horn review is saying that it's not geography, it's political fixation. It takes me a long time to go through it, but it is absurd.
Well, Eritrea is not responsible for the whole situation. We didn't choose to be in that location. We didn't want to be Eritreans by choice. We became by natural coincidence. Life is just a coincidence, as you know. Identity is a coincidence. We became Eritreans by coincidence, like any other nature, like any other human being on earth, like Ethiopians and so on and so forth. We cannot afford not being Eritreans that we naturally are. And the land belongs to us, the seas belong to everybody, maybe. The whole world actually must share its resources. The only thing we can work out with our neighbors, Ethiopians, is just by sharing our ports in terms of business, not in terms of ownership. Ladies and gentlemen, this was beautiful. I really appreciate it. The discussion was healthy, but the question amazes me. Should this question arrive at this stage of history, at this stage of history where Eritrea has evolved as super, basically in the region, diplomatically speaking, and in terms of keeping itself peacefully and securing its boundaries, its seas? I cannot understand. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about a country composed of over 10 liberation movements. I don't even know if Ethiopia will exist in the near future. It was rejected by its own people. 12 liberation movements, 10 or 11, rejecting their Ethiopianism. And here is Illuminati government trying to do something beyond his capacity and beyond the common sense of the entire universal community, ladies and gentlemen. I think I will have to complete here. Let's go back, and here's the conclusion. Probably he has some more to get. But the question itself is ridiculous for me to entertain.
Contradictions and the PP.
They said that Ethiopia will never be a prisoner of geography. And now this Horn review is saying that it's not geography, it's political fixation. It takes me a long time to go through it.
If Ethiopians have a problem with their geographic locations, they should blame God. The Eritreans didn't choose that to be.
It's absurd.
Contradictions and the PP regime are very synonymous. But in terms of Eritrean independence, Iskel, I think many Ethiopians find it psychologically difficult to accept that Eritrea won their independence fair and square through winning the war, as they say. But I think the perception that many Ethiopians have is that it was a gift. It was within Ethiopia's grace and the gift to allow Eritrea to become independence, which is why conversation about whether to withdraw it or not becomes has a bit of sense. So that is where they're coming from. But I think the argument from Ethiopian side is that as things stand now, they couldn't invade because then Ethiopia would be accused of breaching international border. But that if it doesn't recognize Eritrea as a sovereign state anymore, then that charge couldn't be made. That is the argument. I don't know how solid it is, but that is what they would say.
I don't think so. I have never heard the same Ethiopian coming up like this. Okay, so if Eritrea wants to invade Ethiopia, it will have to prove recognizing that country as an independent nation. Then it will be legitimate to invade. I cannot understand it. Okay, pull recognition away, so by default create a bigger Ethiopian in chaos and just go invade, and the whole world will look at you about somebody saying, I cannot believe it. But let me see how the professor responds.
I kind of slightly disagree with you that the Ethiopian people are still psychologically traumatized by...
By the way, I forgot to say, the Eritreans convincingly, in view of the whole world I'm talking about, defeated the Ethiopian army when they liberated their country.
The Eritrean independence, it's been 30 years, 3 decades, even more than 3 decades. What that means is more than 60% of the Ethiopian population today was born after the Eritrean independence. So those that are psychologically traumatized most of them are in their graves. They're not alive. This generation, the new generation knows Eritrea as an independent country. They don't remember that Ethiopia was part of Ethiopia. They don't remember that. They accept only Eritrea. They know Eritrea only as an independent country. And this thing is really strange to them that Ethiopia is conjuring up past history selectively to bolster their position. So, look, there was no demand. There was no demand. There was no movement. There was no organization that was demanding that Ethiopia should go back and reclaim its port, the asset port. There was no. If anybody knows, except that.
Do you have a car?
Some Ethiopians of that era were debating the issue during elections. Other than that, there was no movement. There was no commotion in Ethiopia because Ethiopia was doing very well without a port. The notion that Ethiopia, this is an existential question for Ethiopia, is a fabrication of the PP for their own reasons. It's not true. Ethiopia registered tremendous growth without a port. Tremendous growth without a port. But that's an issue that is separate what you and I might talk about, what the port demand is. But what they're saying right now that Eritrea, you see, the idea of fixation, that Eritrea's fixation, that's what the title of the editorial is, say that should there be war with Eritrea, it's not because of geography, but as much as fixation, political fixation. It's not geography. The president of the Biltzigana party was not saying that, exactly that. The first day that he came back, he came with the idea of we're going to reclaim the port. He had this PowerPoint presentation in which he talked about water on that on water on the eastern coast of Ethiopia and water.
Well, I said, German, you can go to the video and look at it, the channel, basically, but if Ethiopia insists in having a navy without waters, well, it will have to be like Bolivia to have its navy intact in its own waters inland. There is no other choice. But it can use the ports of its neighbors, like most of the people, most of the countries. Not all, actually, most of them, but all of the countries, all the countries considered to be landlocked. Like, for example, as such, the yellow colored countries, well, Ethiopia is welcome to use ports in Sudan, the ports in Eritrea, the ports in Djibouti, the ports in Somalia and in Kenya. By law. That's the only option it has. Therefore, whether it recognizes Eritrea doesn't make sense at all. The maximum it does is close our embassies and we don't care. Okay, we don't care if she chooses to be like that. Well, we will close their embassies too. If they have one in Asmara, I don't know if they have. If they do have, I'm not sure, but we have embassy in Eritrea, in Ethiopia. I don't think we have Eritrean and Ethiopian embassy in Eritrea, but we have, because we are Africans, and Addis Ababa is the home of AU, and they can't even kick us out from that. So they can fight with the United Nations, with the whole world, with the African Union, the Arab Leagues, the Red Sea nations, okay? Whatever you have, if they want to go that routing, but for Eritrea, it will not matter. Nothing will change. The whole world will just laugh at them. And I don't think they have the courage and the intellectual capacity or whatever, in whatever way they can present it, they cannot present it because they know it's futile, it's not going to work. So our independence is forever, ladies and gentlemen, or we want us to coexist peacefully with Ethiopia. So these dreamers, to my expectation, will go away as soon as possible because the Ethiopian resistance in the region cannot stand it. Have a good time. Have a good time, and please subscribe. Introduce this channel. It's a new channel. And if you like it, express it by liking it. I'll see you next time, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see you next time. And thank you for listening.